Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the C Squared podcast. Here we go with the coverage of the World Chess Championship match between Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi. That is happening right now in Astana, Kazakhstan, and we will be doing commentary on the games. We will be analyzing the games after each and every round. So today was round number one. I have to say, Jan looked primed to potentially get a victory after the first few minutes and the first few moves, but Ding Liren, well, managed to defend. Let's get straight into the analysis. Fabi, what do you have for us?
Yeah, it was a very interesting game. It was clear one player was pressing. It was Jan Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces. He started with e4. He showed his intentions to the world in terms of openings, that he wants to pressure Ding in the marshal. And one of our questions yesterday was, will Ding play the marshal, which is his mainstay defense? And he did. He played e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, Ruy Lopez. So we were speculating about Italian game. Jan played the Ruy Lopez instead. a6, and that's where Ding showed he doesn't want to play any sort of Berlin or anti-Berlin. He wants to play his marshal, which he knows so well. Bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop e7. Of course, Black can also play a million other moves, but Ding showed he's still sticking to his marshal. And now Jan played an interesting move, bishop takes c6.
Did this move surprise you, Fabi? Because we were expecting something like d3, maybe some anti-marshals to arise on the board. Yeah, this bishop takes c6, much more of a sideline. Would you say so?
Yeah, so bishop takes c6 is definitely a sideline. It's also a move which Giri played to beat Ding in the candidates in 2021. Although, that being said, Giri did have a worse position out of the opening, so the fact that he won was not because of the opening battle. I think this shows two things. One is that Jan has probably not found, some huge weapon against the marshal, and the other is that he's going to go hunting in small places against the marshal. And because bishop takes c6 is a move that, yeah, he found an interesting idea for sure. He did get an advantage, but it's not a move that he's going to play again. I would be shocked if he plays bishop takes c6 at any point during the match again. I think it was a throwaway weapon, but that being said, a pretty good one. So bishop c6 dc.
What you're saying is that most likely we will be seeing, if Ding decides to repeat the marshal and this direction, we will be seeing something a bit more mainlinely. Mainliney. Yeah, that must be a word.
I don't think it's a word, but let's go with it. I think that what I would predict that Jan will play e4 again. Ding will stick with his anti-marshal. I see no reason why he would deviate. This game isn't he didn't see some kind of theoretical problem in the anti-marshal.
Yes.
He saw a practical problem for his game, but something that if you analyze with computers, you solve it pretty easily. So he'll stick with his anti-marshal, and I assume that Jan he'll either start to search in the anti-marshal. I don't think he'll go for like the marshal pawn sacrifice lines, or he will switch to something else entirely besides the Ruy Lopez.
Perfect.
But yeah, I would assume that Ruy Lopez will be seen again in this match.
Perfect.
So
now c6, rook to e1.
Rook to e1, an interesting move. So Giri played d3. We mentioned that. Rook to e1 is not a move that the computer appreciates initially. I have to be said, though, it was played by Paravian, and Paravian is known for having very dangerous theoretical ideas, usually practical ideas,
yes,
in various e45 lines. And he's especially known for essaying them in these online rapid games where they're especially dangerous. So Rook e1, I checked this move a little bit. I hadn't checked it too much in the past, but I checked this move a little bit this morning. And I thought, yeah, it's actually quite a dangerous try. Because, okay, so Ding played knight to d7. The computer wants to play the move bishop to g4, which pins the knight.
Yes.
Then White's idea must have been to play h3, bishop h5. Otherwise, bishop takes f3, White gets rid of the bishop pair and has a slight structural advantage. We can say White is slightly better. So bishop h5 is the critical move, and then the critical move is g4.
Yes.
Which the computer doesn't like at all at the start, but once you analyze it, you start to realize it's not so simple for Black.
And I think this is something that Jan Gustafsson was also mentioning on Twitter. This is part of his chessable DVD, and he analyzed it, and he was saying that this should probably equalize for Black.
Yeah, there you go. Chessable is the answer to all our opening questions.
Everything.
I think that probably black is equalizing with the piece sacrifice. Knight takes g4, h4, bishop g4. But this is where power beyond, he played the move d4. And yeah, if you know it, then probably you equalize with black. E d4, queen d3.
Yes.
On the other hand, it's very responsible. Black is down a piece. He has 3 pawns. So it's kind of material equality, let's say, from that point of view. You know, we call knight 3 points and we call 3 pawns 3 points as well. But it's so dynamic. The structure is a bit weird. And if white frees the pieces, gets the king safe, then probably white is going to be better.
So you think this is probably a direction that Jan probed during his analysis with his
I think
seconds.
Basically this is a try. It's like a safe try. If you know this position with white, and you're betting that your opponent is either unfamiliar or doesn't really remember the details, then it's a good try. Like, you don't really have risk because you know the position. It looks scary that your king is open, that your opponent sacrificed a piece, but you have the power of analysis at your side, and you're probably not going to get into big trouble.
Perfect.
So that's why I think Ding didn't go for that, because bishop g4, you know, he either knew that h3 g4 is some sort of weird stuff, and knight d7 is a safe move, or he just didn't want to go for anything like that, and he played knight d7 because it can't be a bad move, right?
Yes.
That means that there's a third option, queen d6, d4 is now the critical move, and bishop g4, and the computer also says this is fine for black. Again, it's one of those positions that I'm sure Jan has analyzed, and Ding probably is not as familiar with. So he played a safe move, knight to d7.
Yes. d4.
Jan played d4, direct, good move. E d4, black has to resolve this tension, and this is the best way to do so. Queen d4, short castle because g7 is hanging.
Yes.
Bishop goes to f4, very harmonious. Basically, white doesn't want to trade queens, so white is preparing for knight c5, which is what Ding played, so that you could put the queen on e3, hiding the queen, but you have the bishop outside of the queen, like the bishop isn't blocked on c1, blocked by the queen anymore. So knight c5, queen e3. This was the first interesting moment. Well, not the first interesting moment, but from Ding's point of view, the first questionable moment. He made a questionable move, bishop to g4. It's a natural move. Basically, he wants to put the knight on e6, but he wants the bishop outside the pawn chain first.
Correct.
That being said, bishop g4 more leaves the bishop as a target rather than as an active piece, and he should have played knight to e6 first. This has been played before, not in too many games. It was played in a game, Lanin Hyrulin from 2006. We said Hyrulin is one of Jan's seconds, but that being said, 2006, that was a long time ago. They were probably just kids at that point.
They were indeed.
So,
yeah.
I don't think that, I don't even know if he remembers that game, but he played the correct way, knight e6, bishop to g3. Okay, now he played b5, which is a bit of an unusual move, and
that's a bit
not a terrible one, but probably not a great one.
Rash, yeah. That's a bit rash. Probably you have to go a5, yeah?
Well, I think bishop c5 is probably the best move. Posing the question to white's queen, and black's queen will now comfortably sit on e7 or maybe even f6. And yeah, the position is about equal, but I'm sure that Jan had some analysis, some ways to, you know, try to outplay Ding in case it reached this position. But this was the way that Ding should have played.
Yes, cool.
So bishop g4.
He played bishop g4, yes.
Now, Jan played knight d4. It's a good move. There's basically two equivalent options. They both have their pluses and minuses. Knight d4 is more of a slow positional move, and it's actually kind of the main computer move, so it's probably what Jan had analyzed, right? He kind of knew you play knight d4. There is knight e5 as well. It's also very interesting. Basically, black should play bishop to h5, because if you don't put the bishop on h5, let's say you play bishop to e6, then suddenly white gets knight c3 followed by rook a to d1 with tempo, and it's a lot of very annoying moves, development moves with tempo.
Yeah.
Bishop to h5, and then white can play g4. It's very aggressive. Bishop to g6 most likely, and white has a bunch of ways to develop. Let's say knight to c3, and black will try to. White will either try to play bishop g3, f4, or more likely black at some point will play f6, and white will take on g6. And white has the kind of typical kingside majority structure that gives us a small advantage. But I actually like Jan's move even more, knight to d4.
Yes.
Basically, the knight is at some point saying, well, if your bishop moves, let's say he goes to h5, my knight will jump into f5. And at some point, I will pose a question to his bishop, maybe with h3. And if the bishop goes back, then you just waste time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I like this
queen
move, knight to
d7.
d4. Queen d7.
Queen to d7 is Ding's way of saying, before you have time to play h3, I'm going to play rook h8 and question your knight on d4. Right?
That makes a lot of sense.
It's now a tempo game.
Yes.
Knight to c3, rook a to d8, and here Jan had an excellent chance at getting a really, really big advantage. He played an inaccurate move, his first inaccurate move of the game, knight to f5.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he had this brilliant move h3. So the first point of h3 is it's a simple tactic, but it's a very beautiful one. The tactic is queen takes d4 would be a great move if not for knight to d5.
Ooh, that's nice.
There's a bunch of tactics here. First of all, a very simple one is queen takes e3, knight takes e7, king h8. That's an intermediate check. Bishop takes e3. Black has two pieces hanging and will lose one of them.
Yes.
So this wins.
Yes.
The more complicated move after knight d5 is rook takes d5. E takes d5. Materially, black is doing well. Two pieces for the rook. But after queen takes e3, rook takes e3, again, one of those pieces drops off.
Yes.
So it's not super difficult tactics, at least queen takes d4. After h3, that gives black I think if you see queen d4, knight d5, you play h3 and then you make black think.
Yes. And you can actually start with h3 before knight c3, rook a d8, and then knight c3 as well.
Yeah, if you see this in advance, then you can even do it like this.
This knight c3 move and h3, it's very, very nice. By the way, queen takes d4, knight d5. Do we have bishop to f6? Is that a move?
Bishop to f6 is the best move, but after knight takes f6, if you take with the queen on f6, then there's another strong intermediate move, bishop to g5.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you take the rook on d8, black will not be able to recapture without dropping
either the bishop on g4 or the knight on c5, yes.
But you can play g takes f6 instead of queen f6. But here it's just a terrible position because you messed up your kingside structure, and the best way to exploit it is queen g3. And basically, white should win this position.
Yes.
It's not like completely winning, but yeah, it's pretty lousy for black.
Cool. He did not spot this move.
That being said, after h3, it's not like white is winning. Black does have moves. Bishop h5 is the most natural one. But after bishop h5, knight to f5, white is definitely much better. And we have to say h3 was a good chance. So he played an accurate move.
Yes.
Knight to f5.
Knight to f5.
And Ding responded with an accurate move as well. Knight to e6.
Yes.
He needed to take and rook fe8. And the position, I don't really see a huge danger for black. I think maybe he was afraid of some kind of f6 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Bishop d6, queen g3. I mean, it looks a bit scary, but after g6, it's really, white cannot really get to that h6 square so quickly.
And once you get there, I go bishop f8, and that defends the g7 square as well.
Yeah, if you were to play queen h6 right now, then bishop f8 would cover the mate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after rook fe8, white has some other moves like g4, but they're not super dangerous to my eye.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like black is better. It's about equal in many ways. I'm a bit surprised that he played knight e6. I think he was sort of still a bit shaken, like by the result of the opening, that it was quite a dangerous opening for him.
He was definitely feeling some pressure, and in fact, I've read somewhere, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, he said, I felt a bit depressed during the first parts of the game. I didn't think about chess so much. My mind was very strange, many memories, feelings. I felt a little bit like there was something wrong with my mind. Maybe the pressure of the match. This is what Ding said at the press conference after the first game. Can you relate at all to these feelings?
No, not really. Like I felt in the first game, I felt very kind of jittery, like the first few moves, and at some point I calmed down. Then my position became terrible, and of course I was very nervous, but purely from a chess sense.
Got it.
Chess point of view. I was nervous because my position sucked, and I was down on time, and I was close to losing the first game. I only felt like in survival mode during that game. And then at some point I actually did survive, which was very fortunate for me, of course. So I never like had philosophical feelings during the game. I had philosophical feelings in general, yeah, but not during like my first World Championship game. I don't know. It's a bit of an interesting comment from Ding, but I can't relate fully.
Got it. All right, let's keep it going. Knight to e6.
Yeah, so Jan took on
e7.
e7. White had other options, but this is basically Jan knows that he has a slight advantage after this move, so that's why he played it. Take bishop g3.
Mm-hmm.
Here, okay, Ding should have played f5. That's what the computer says, but I can understand not wanting to play this. I would probably not play this myself, but it's the best way to avoid the fate that he had, which was a very, very unpleasant defensive task. He played bishop h5, which is kind of the automatic move. Like, you're getting out of the way of f3 preemptively. But after f3, white has just a very solid advantage that basically never dissipates, and the advantage is based on two factors. One factor is the kingside majority, 4 against 3. Black has a queenside majority of doubled pawns, so it's less relevant majority. The other factor is the opposite-colored bishops. White's bishop on g3 really is very influential. It targets c7. Black's bishop is a bit blunted by white's pawns and doesn't have as much influence. So these opposite-colored bishops, usually you would think they're a factor that increases the drawishness of the position. In this case, they actually increase white's chances of getting an advantage.
Got it. F6.
So now they played, some kind of quiet moves. F6, H3, H6, King H2. Kind of all these moves are playable, but there's also alternatives on each move, but they don't change the situation a whole lot.
Bishop F7.
Bishop F7, Rook H-D1. I don't know if Rook H-D1 trading rooks was the right strategy. White also had a very aggressive option. First, you play A3, you stop Queen B4. Black has no real plans here. Even if Black starts a plan like Rook to D7, you can still play F4. And basically, the idea is to play F4 and F5 and then try to go for some sort of kingside play. And then after Black plays Knight to D4, the Knight on D4 is good, but White plays Queen to F2 and follows up with F5 and, basically it's
pawn storm on in the center and on the king side.
Yeah, it's kind of a pawn storm. It's also a positional idea. F5 is known from the classic game Lasker Capablanca from 1914. If any,
you're quoting the classics. I see what you're doing. Yes, you're giving the viewers some homework. Yes.
If this is a very famous game, if our viewers want to see like a classic example of the F5 move, which also at some point Fischer used, and for example, I at some point used this knowledge against Richard Rapport. It's like a very known idea that you play F5 because you're gaining space and you're restricting Black's pieces. Yeah. So we'll see that later in the game too.
For sure.
Instead, Jan played a good move. We cannot say this is a bad move at all. Rook 8 to D1, but he's going for a more slow game. He's going to trade the rooks at this point.
Yes.
Ding could have also traded the rooks immediately. Rook D1, Rook D1, Rook D8, which instead he decided to wait a bit. B6, A3, A5. Again, they made these kind of small improving moves. But from Black's point of view, I'm not sure it's really improving because if we imagine a day when C7 falls, now B6 and A5 are also weak. So Jan played Knight to E2. I think probably not like super accurate as a move, but you can't say it's a bad move for sure.
Yes.
Rook D1, Rook D1, Rook D8, trading rooks. Rook to D3. White is saying, I want to trade rooks on my terms. The funny thing is, I think he could have also traded rooks, Rook D8, Queen D8, and Queen D3. Because I'm not sure Black wants to trade queens, surprisingly. Because you end up with this really weak C7 pawn after Queen D3, C D3. But personally, I would never do this, so I can't say it was a mistake or anything. Rook D3 is a perfectly fine move.
Yes.
Here, Ding played C5. I think it's a bit of a questionable move in hindsight, but it's a move that I would play. So, the computer kind of likes to play B5, either immediately or after trading on Rook D3, Queen D3, B5. Basically, it establishes this B5, A4, and the idea of that is that if at some point I lose C7, at least I'll never lose the rest of my pawns because they're all in light squares.
I lose just one pawn, yeah, and he wants to defend like that. Okay, that makes sense.
But it's also a pawn sacrifice based on Queen C3 and some kind of like B4 stuff. And I don't know if...
it looks very shaky, I'm not going to lie.
It looks weird, but anyway, this is what the computer likes. So C5, perfectly natural move. Queen to D2. White is sort of encouraging Black to trade on D3. Instead, Ding makes C6. We can say this is like his first really big mistake of the game. You should take on D3, and then you can play C6. But if you play C6 immediately like he did, then you end up with tactical problems, which is what Jan highlighted. He took on D8. Now, if you take with the queen on D8, you lose your pawns, because take bishop C7. It's a very clear tactic. You just win the B6 pawn, and basically Black ends up a pawn down with the awful structure on the queen side.
This is losing.
Knight D8. And now Queen F4. Maybe Ding either missed or underestimated this move. Very strong move by Jan. The queen is invading to B8, and it's very difficult to stop that.
Yeah.
And if you play a move like Queen to B7 to stop it, then you get hit with Queen C7. Ooh. And we already saw how you lose your pawns in this scenario, right?
Yes.
So Ding played b5, probably a good move.
Desperado mode right now. So
also says bishop c4 is possible, but b5 looks very natural. Queen b8, king h7.
And this is actually when I woke up and I saw Ding has just played c6, Jan took on d8. Ding had 13 minutes at this point, Jan with 40 minutes. I was 90% sure that Jan is going to convert this.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say what the chance of converting this is, but this was probably his best chance in the game.
An incredible
to win this game.
Yeah.
And he started to drift here. And I don't know exactly what his time expenditure was at this moment. Maybe you can say exactly what.
I'll keep you updated, yes, on that.
He played bishop to d6, which I think is the first questionable move.
And he actually spent almost 15 minutes on this move, bishop to d6.
I think there's two moves that you consider here to start, and then maybe you get into other moves. But the first moves that come to mind are the move he played, bishop to d6, and the second move is bishop to c7. And the first thing you probably think of is bishop d6, queen d7, bishop takes c5, right? It's like the first thing you think of, and then you see queen d2, and it looks a bit like black is getting activity. I think that the second thing you think of is bishop c7. It forces knight to e6, and then you take on a5. Both cases you win a pawn, but here black's queen takes longer to get into the game. Black should play queen to d7 to try to get queen d1 and some sort of counterplay. And after queen to d7, white can play knight to f4.
Yes.
Certainly not an easy decision to trade the knights. I think black probably does take on f4, although there are other moves like knight to d4. There is certainly a lot to consider here. It's not like an easy moment.
Yes.
Knight d4 is also a serious move, but let's say knight takes f4, queen f4. If we get a position like this, I don't know if white is winning objectively. It's very, very likely that at some point we see a trade of queens. And at that point, it's also a real question. And it might even be a matter of tempi if white's king gets, because it's quite a long way. It has to go g1 if we trade queens, g1, f2, e3. Then you have to provoke the c pawn forward, and then you have to play king d4, c5. And if you get to that point, probably you win. But black will also have moves in the meantime, and it might be a tempi game. But if he had gotten this position after queen takes f4, when Ding is low on time, and it's sort of this position where it's not concrete, right? Yes. Ding just has to defend move by move without any hope that it immediately simplifies. Then we're talking serious winning chances. I don't know if it's 90%, but I would say it's definitely over 60%.
Got it.
And it might be 70, 80%. Who knows?
Perfect. Cool.
So I think bishop c7, bishop a5 was a good chance. Bishop d6 is not a bad move. But after queen d7, knight g3 is probably not the best move. He should probably play queen c7, and we get a very unpleasant endgame for black. He could have also played queen c7 the move before, but this was his last chance to do it. Take, knight b7, and it's equal material. It's obstacle bishops. On the other hand, that knight on b7 is quite pathetic. It's only a defensive piece. And white can continue like king g3, king f2, g4. It's a slow sort of grind.
Just push the pawns on the king side, get the knight to f5, try to maintain the pressure, basically.
I don't know if it's winning for white or a draw, but I think that it is like, from an objective point of view, it's already 50-50 if black can even hold this.
Yeah.
And from a practical point of view, it might also be super difficult.
Definitely great chances for white.
So he played knight to g3 instead, and I don't like this for a few reasons. First of all, it gives white a very easy move, which is knight to e6. Black and a very easy move, which is knight to e6. Like, you just play this without thinking, I think. Or you don't have to think too much.
Yeah.
And then white has to start taking some sort of difficult decisions. So now it's not only that that white made the task harder for himself, he made it also easier for black, right? So after knight e6, he played f4, very aggressive. But at this point, black could have already objectively equalized with the move knight to d4. And here, after either bishop takes c5, knight c2, or c3, knight b3, the position is kind of unclear. I'd rather be white. Yeah, that's definitely the case.
Obviously.
But we're already talking about not like, is black losing objectively or drawing objectively, but black is definitely okay, and now we just have to play well.
Yeah.
So Ding also played a decent move, h5, but not as good as knight d4. And Jan played a good move, c3.
Taking away the d4 square for the knight.
Yeah, stopping this whole knight d4 business once and for all. And Ding made an inaccurate move, c4. But I think it was very difficult to play h4. Because after h4, first of all, it's a responsible decision. You could lose this pawn. Yes. But there's also the very dangerous-looking knight f5 then you have to play bishop g6. This was the correct way for black to play.
Mm-hmm.
And in this position, there's a few things. First of all, knight h4, bishop to e4, f5, knight g5, knight to g6. You can get very scared here, and I would be scared.
There's checkmate in one, sighting.
But after queen to f5, knight to f8, king to h6. Not the only move, but also king g8. Black is doing fine. In fact, white has to find an accurate way to make a draw there.
Mm-hmm.
But also on move 37, after bishop g6, there's the move knight to e7, with the idea not only of f5 but also queen g8.
At move what?
Move 34, h4, knight f5, bishop g6, knight to e7.
Yes.
And now black can play bishop to f7 or bishop to e8. But for example, let's say bishop to e8. Computer says 0, 0, 0, as in this is a draw.
Complete draw, yeah.
But from a visual point of view, it looks like black can't move, and white has all these active dangerous pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Black does have a threat here, which is knight takes f4, right, exploiting the kind of overloaded nature of the bishop on d6. But from a visual point of view, I understand why Ding would not want to go for this. I would probably feel exactly the same way. I would not want to go for this with black.
Especially with less than 10 minutes on the clock, with no increment, and still quite a few moves to make.
But that being said, the move c4 that he played is a mistake, which is nearly like leading to a losing position for black.
Okay.
White played h4, and black is already basically white is threatening f5. And if you get this f5 in, black's right knight will be relegated to some really sad squares again. For example, knight to d8, black will lose a piece with bishop to c7, right? If black played some like a4 here.
Exactly.
Then f5, knight d8, bishop c7, and you just lose your knight.
Yeah.
So black is in a very desperate situation after h4. Maybe Ding missed this move because I don't think, or maybe he was prepared to play queen d8 like he played. And here Jan played the final inaccurate move. This was his last chance.
He played queen b7.
Yeah, he played queen b7, and queen b7 is basically, from how I see it, it's a move based not on calculation, but on I want to win this game and I need to keep queens on. And that's a very sort of familiar sentiment to me, because that's also sometimes how I feel. Like, okay, I need to win this game. I was always better and I need to keep queens on. And it's not based on the demands of the position. The demands of the position are you need to trade queens.
Queen takes d8, knight takes d8, bishop c7.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to say. I don't think bishop c7 because knight to e6 comes, and then you kind of have to repeat.
Got it.
But white has a good move f5 here. We already mentioned this as a typical idea. It's also from the classic game, Lasker Capablanca. We saw it in previous variations of this game. Basically, f5 is dominating the knight. The knight has only one more square to go to, b7, which is where it goes. And white plays bishop to e7.
Ooh.
A very clear domination of this knight.
That
and in
knight
this
is not
position,
going anywhere. Maybe you can go a4.
I think black should play a4.
Yeah.
But white plays knight to e2 here. I'm not even sure if a4 is the right move. White plays knight to e2 here, and then plays king to g3. And the knight can go wherever. It can go to a5. Yeah, it's going to get out of that like complete domination position.
Yeah.
But computer is saying, yeah, white is on the verge of winning this position.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. It's because after knight e2, let's say you play knight a5, king g3, and knight b3. This is not what the computer recommends for black. White plays king to f4. And it's not only your knight that's dominated, but your king and bishop also are not doing anything. And white is playing e5 very quickly. White's king is just invading.
Yeah.
If black plays, for example, knight to
knight to c1.
Let's say
knight to c1. The knight on e2. Yes. Actually, that's a good point, right? You have to keep a knight on e2 so that you don't get knight c1, knight d3, which could
you can try to get like knight a1, knight c2, knight e1, but it takes eons for black to get that.
Yeah.
After bishop e7, there's also another plan, which is probably the right plan, which is to play either g6 immediately or bishop e8 followed by g6. And I was checking this position a little bit. It's super dangerous. Like after bishop e7, bishop e8, for example, knight to e2 again.
Yeah.
g6. So black is trying to get the. It's already difficult to play g6 because it's sacking the f6 pawn. But after bishop f6, knight to c5, black gets a lot of counterplay. But then there's a dangerous move, knight to f4, king to g7, and g4. And I don't blame anyone for not understanding his position. I don't understand the endgame myself. But black is surviving with absolutely only moves in this position. For like the next 10 moves, it's only moves.
Wow.
So it just shows the danger that black is facing in this endgame because of the domination of the pieces. White's bishop on e7 being so powerful, black having no space, the kingside majority being a factor.
And this is still not move 40. So imagine getting this with the clock ticking down and no increment on the clock. You on your last 30 seconds and still having to make 2 moves. Yeah, good luck with that.
I think after bishop t7, I would like bet my life pretty much that black plays a4 followed by knight to a5.
Yes.
I don't see anyone playing bishop e8 followed by g6. Maybe bishop e8, knight e2, king g8. I could see this happening, but then after knight f4, let's say king to f7, knight to g6, you end up completely dominated. Like here, you just can't move. Ever.
Paralyzed. Yes, completely
you're paralyzed. So there's a lot of danger here for black. Ding would have to show his absolute best defensive skills to survive this endgame.
Cool.
Instead, queen b7 happened, and I think this is a moment that Jan will regret. Bishop to e8, of course. You don't take on d6. I guess it's a small but simple trap. Queen d6, queen f7, and if knight takes f4, knight to f5. So pretty simple trap. Ding avoids it with bishop to e8. Knight to f5, queen d7. Yeah, now the endgame is totally different because black's knight is not on b7, it's on e6. Black's bishop is not stuck on f7, it's on d7. This endgame after queen d7, bishop d7 would be already equal.
Yes.
And likewise, after queen to b8, queen to d8, take. Here, there's a difference. There's no f5 because the knight is on f5. Bishop c7 is now met by knight to e6, and black has no problems.
Yes.
Instead, Jan played move 38, knight to d4, knight to b7. Now it's already like if bishop to e7, then black's king can get very quickly to f7, king g6, and so white no longer has the time to set up a dominating bind. Right?
And actually, if you go f5, king f7 just wins the piece. So
now you can do this. If you could get the knight to g6 from d4 here, we have that position, right?
Fly the knight to
but
g6.
Knight on d4 does nothing.
Yeah.
Instead, Jan played e5. Already, I think once you play e5, it's kind of a sign that you are no longer better.
A concession.
King to g8, king to g3, bishop to e7. At this point, black has an abundance of decent moves to hold.
And this is move 40. This is when the players have reached time control as well.
Yeah, bishop c7, knight c5, good move. I mean, you don't have to sack the a pawn. There's also other moves like c5 is a good move, but knight c5 is a perfectly nice move. Bishop takes a5, king f7, good
Bishop
move.
b4.
The knight is going to d3, so although black is temporarily down a pawn, you are getting that b2 pawn back.
Yes.
Bishop b4, knight d3, e6, bishop e6, knight c6, bishop d7, just like one final little trap, knight takes b2, don't do that. Knight d8.
Yes, very nice.
Obviously, these are like bullet traps, so bishop d7, knight d4, knight takes b2,
king f3,
king f3, knight d3,
g3,
g3,
and
knight c1,
knight
king
c1, king e3. Yeah, well, I have to say, a very back and forth, and with your analysis and the fact that you already done some analysis with strong engines, this proves that Jan had tremendous chances throughout the game, and I have to say Ding had a very, very difficult start to the World Championship match. Psychologically, I think there are some pros and cons for both players. Obviously, Jan must be happy with the fact that the opening kind of worked. Gave him a very decent, stable, long-term advantage, which he exploited. He saw that he can make a dent in his opponent's defense. Ding, let's say, was a bit shaky on the defense. But from Ding's perspective, look, you survived, yeah? And that's definitely a positive. From what I'm hearing is Ding is having some problems. He switched hotels. He looked very cold. I've seen some pictures from their resting area. Ding has this jacket on, this like full-on jacket with a hoodie on, looking very very cold actually. And
yeah, I've seen him wearing a jacket during games before. For example, in Baikonze, I've seen him doing this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's like naturally.
Perhaps he's just naturally a cold guy, or like.
Yeah, maybe he's more sensitive to cold temperatures. Yeah. So opening battle definitely advantage Jan. He won the opening battle. He outplayed Ding in terms of preparation, and then in terms of the actual gameplay, I have to say, like, from what I saw, Ding made one very questionable move, c6 in the game. But Jan made more questionable decisions.
Yes.
Like this whole bishop d6, knight g3, and especially queen to b7 on move 34, very questionable decision, and to my mind. So from gameplay point of view and from, let's say, surviving difficult position, obviously Ding has reasons to be quite satisfied.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, that's a great start to the World Championship match. Game 1 is in the books. We have a draw. These players are still tied. What do you expect to see tomorrow from Ding? Let's start with the first move.
Yeah, I would guess. I mean, this is difficult because, like, Ding is not a natural e4 player, and if I were wanting to target Jan, he plays the Petrov, let's say. But I think Jan is also a guy who could easily switch to the Berlin. So I would maybe think about targeting him in the Petrov, right? But if you're playing d4 and you think Jan is a guy who could play some sort of Tarish lines which are super solid, some kind of Rogozin lines which are super solid as he's played, we know he plays the Rogozin, then I don't know if I would feel comfortable challenging him in the classical d4 variations. And looking for ideas in the Catalan, I would definitely consider that in my pre-match preparation. But I can only say what I would do if I had maybe found some small ideas in the Catalan. Then I would definitely consider that. Otherwise, I expect very, very likely is that we see d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3. This is Ding's natural area to go to, and it would also feel Jan out. Like, what does he want to do here? Basically, if Jan plays a Rogozin here, then I think Ding and his team could have searched for ideas in the Rogozin. If Jan plays c5 in that position,
that's the big problem nowadays. Yeah,
d5. Yeah, this is definitely a big problem. You can kind of search for ideas in e3 here, c5, e3, but c takes d5, cd4. People try often. It's very difficult because there's some kind of known endgames where you can go for, but basically White never wins those endgames at this point. Like, I don't know how many times I've seen White bash their head against those endgames in that Tarish line. So Catalan or that sort of stuff is maybe the two places I would, if I had to make a guess, that I would guess for.
Perfect. Well, tomorrow we are going to get a full set of opening questions answered, because Ding will have, for the first time in the match, the white pieces. That's going to be very exciting. We will be here doing the review and the analysis post-game. So I'll see you guys, and we will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.
See you guys tomorrow.